qualifying for the knockout stages of the UEFA Champions League was always going to be a challenge for Juventus, given the very precarious situation they found themselves in going into their last two matches in the group stages. However, any chances they had were essentially killed off. In fact, not essentially, they were officially killed off with the fact that they ended up losing their penultimate group game to Benfica 4-3. Now, that in itself summed up a lot of their problems, and of course, it didn't help matters that even other results, even if they had beaten Benfica, there was a chance that they wouldn't have been making it either way. But it continued Juventus's poor run in the tournament, and in fact has continued their poor run throughout this season as of late, which does lead us to a very interesting question: that does the club actually need a total reset, and do they need to actually rebuild to become competitive again in the future? The short answer to that question is yes. As for the long answer, well, that's what we're here for. We're going to check in and tell you why exactly it is that the grand old lady of Italy is in desperate need of a revamp and a cultural reset to actually become successful again, because as things stand, they risk being left behind not just by Europe's elite, but even the top clubs in Italy, who have been experiencing something of a resurgence in recent times. Now, one of the reasons why there's been so much stress on the fact that Juventus haven't been looking great this year is because they were in a relatively easy group when it comes to the Champions League. And yes, that's no disrespect to Benfica, but you would be expecting Juventus to beat Benfica 9 times out of 10. Unfortunately, that's not what happened in this particular group. They in fact only ended up winning one of their 5 matches so far. In fact, they lost their first game to PSG, and okay, you could still forgive a loss to PSG, saying, yeah, they were probably the other strongest team in the group. Benfica, they ended up losing to at Turin. They then ended up beating Maccabi Haifa at home, but then to make things worse, ended up losing to the very same team in the away fixture. And then their hopes were killed off once they lost 4-3 to Benfica away from home. Now, obviously, plenty of problems there. The fact is, they lost 4 of their 5 matches, which is just not exactly the form of a contender team. It is the form of a team that is struggling at the moment, but their struggles go just well beyond, just the Champions League, and they actually, in fact, go much, much deeper. Because if you look at how things have been going for Juventus in recent seasons, you'd see that there's been a noticeable drop-off in terms of the amount of success that they are experiencing versus the amount of success that they were used to experiencing. Now, granted, at least some of that is down to the fact that clubs like Inter Milan and AC Milan have started becoming more resurgent. A club like AS Roma have come under new ownership, and they're investing heavily. Even clubs like Napoli and even Atalanta, who you remember are a club who are run on an absolute shoestring budget in comparison to other big clubs, and who actually have been way overperforming in recent times. The battle for top 4 spots or even top 6 spots in Italy is very, very tight as things stand. And that is at least partially down to the fact that a lot of these clubs are experiencing resurgences. They're no longer stuck in, debt. And yes, COVID did impact a lot of these clubs, but the simple fact of the matter is they were already on the ascendancy pre-COVID. And so they might have taken a bit of a financial hit, but in a sporting sense, they've been mostly good. So that is one of the things, and in fact, that in fact has partially contributed to the fact that Juventus only last won the league title in 2020, and that before that they had actually won 9 straight league titles on the trot. It was dominance of an unprecedented level in Italy, and in fact, Juventus were the only club who could consistently challenge for the top trophy. There was no other contender. The likes of AC and Inter were going through their own declines and struggles. And, there weren't really that many contenders. The closest contender during that entire time period was Napoli, who then ended up losing both their coach as well as their star player to, different clubs. Maurizio Sarri left Napoli to join Chelsea. Gonzalo Higuain joined Juventus. So there was a lot going on there. However, even the fact that these clubs have made a resurgence doesn't explain the fact that Juventus are currently only 8th in Serie A. Juventus, if you look at the kind of personnel that they have, should at the very least be challenging for a top 4 finish, if not higher than that. The fact that they aren't is in itself a major indictment of where it is that they are, and truth be told, signs of that decline, that slump, were there from the 2019 season. Why do I say that? Well, because in the 2019 season, they let go of Massimiliano Allegri. Now, the reason they actually let go of Allegri at that point was because they wanted to bring in a coach who was more attack-minded. Allegri's tactics were seen as somewhat defensive and conservative, safe. They wanted to bring in a coach who was make the a team be more attacking, play more expansive football in line with the modern times. So they went out and brought Maurizio Sarri to the club. Sarri, however, only lasted one season at Juventus, and he was sacked despite the fact that he won the league, which in itself tells you a lot. He won them the Serie A. But the problem was that Juventus at that point were focused more on a style of play. They weren't focusing on just winning. They wanted to win, but win by playing well. But when they sacked Sarri, Juventus actually ended up, that was actually the last league title they'd win, because again, after that they brought in Andrea Pirlo, who was at that time, of course, coaching their youth teams. They brought in Pirlo for a season, and unfortunately, even he couldn't actually turn around that slump. And of course, it's always a pressure situation if you're getting your first ever managerial job at a top club like Juventus. And Pirlo, all things considered, didn't do too badly. I mean, he did win the Coppa Italia. He did make them or lead them to a top 4 finish. But it was pretty clear at that point that the decline which was there in the team needed to be reversed. So what is it that Juventus did? They went and brought Allegri back 2 years later. Now, the simple fact of the matter is that this return or this homecoming of Allegri hasn't worked out as planned in the slightest. Don't forget, AC Milan won the league last year, and that meant that this was 2 straight seasons where one of Juventus's biggest rivals, both Milan clubs, because in 2021 it was Inter who won it, 2022 it was AC Milan who won it. So in that sense, it's not been a good 2 years for Juventus. Both of their biggest rivals have actually won the league during this time, and they've actually seen their prospects fall further, which then of course raises questions as to why exactly you went back to Allegri if you deemed that him just getting results wasn't good enough. To make things worse, Allegri actually has, more than anything else, his tactics have actually not been successful at all this time around, and it's led many to question whether or not the kind of tactics that he uses are very much a relic of a bygone era. Most teams nowadays prefer to play on the front foot. They look to press high. They look to pass the ball quickly. With Allegri, it's more about being compact defensively, and when you're in possession, be slow and be methodical. It's the exact antithesis of the kind of football that most teams are trying to play now, which is one of the reasons why Juventus are struggling as much. It isn't really that much of a problem when it comes to personnel, although admittedly the team can use some reinforcements. But the kind of football that they're trying to play right now versus the kind of football they want to play in the future, it's not really adding up. And due to this, Juventus find themselves in a bit of a mess, and unfortunately are not just knocked out of the Champions League in the group stages, but also seem very, very unlikely to actually mount a challenge for a top 4 finish as things stand, unless something drastically changes. So that's my take on Juventus and why it is that, I think they need some sort of a reset sooner rather than later if they are to start being successful again. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell icon. Then you can go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram too. And last but not the least, don't forget to download the AajTak app. Thank you all for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Dias. I hope to see you all with us through the day.